So January isn't typically known for beach weather, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, but that's part of what draws me back to the Oregon coast for travel photography trips every winter. Sometimes I end up with big storms and huge waves. Other times the sun comes out to play and it feels like spring. But regardless, it's usually pretty empty. The hotels are really cheap, and you get a side of the coast that a lot of people just don't get to see. Recently, I headed down to Seaside on the northern Oregon coast for 4 days of exploring, wandering, and of course a lot of travel photography. I brought my Fuji X-T5, a couple prime lenses, and the warmest clothes that I have because the forecast was looking rather brisk. So after driving down from Seattle, I arrived in Seaside, Oregon in the mid-afternoon, and it was really cold, but the sun was out, and I'll take that trade-off in the winter here in the Pacific Northwest. So I checked into the hotel, walked down to the beach, it was like half a block away, and just went for a bit of a wander. There were more people there than I expected, actually, and it turns out that it was razor clam season. I was kind of aware that razor clam fishing, hunting, I'm not sure, it was a thing, but I'd never done it before. And I asked a few people what they were doing and how it worked, and they showed me. It was pretty cool. I got a few like street photography style photos here that I like. I really like this one. I love that the seagulls and the man are sort of all doing the same thing, all just digging in the sand for food. And then this one, I love the lines and the light and the reflection, and the fact that you can see the tool that the man is carrying that's used for the razor clam digging. Seaside is a pretty touristy town, and it's probably not one that appeals to a lot of nature photographers. There's just other places on the Oregon coast that are more rugged and wilder with huge cliffs and epic views. But there's something about small towns like this that really appeal to me as a travel photographer. I mean, I enjoy the epic views and I enjoy incorporating that into my travel photography, but including places like this, I feel just adds some richness, some three-dimensionality, and some authenticity to a travel photography project. So the next morning I went for a sunrise walk on the beach and around town. Seaside's a cool town, but it's not the fanciest town on the coast. So some of these shots don't necessarily show the town in its best light. They're not the kind of thing that the tourism board would commission, but I do love the architecture in these small coastal towns, and it was fun to get out and explore. The light was beautiful, but it was absolutely freezing. So I stayed out until my fingers froze off and then went back to the hotel, showered, had coffee, had breakfast, and got ready for the rest of the day. From there, I headed south for some more exploring. On the way, I stopped off in a small town called Garibaldi for a quick early lunch, I had a burger and fries, and it was fine. A little bit overpriced for what it was, but it did the job. Right next door was this set of docks. I always like walking around dock areas. It's cool to see the boats, and every once in a while I'll get an interesting shot of some of the details. The light was super harsh that day, but I did get this one shot of the boat that I like that I think shows the Oregon coast well. And then I found this other dock nearby that people were fishing for crabs on, and it was a pretty photogenic dock in and of itself. So I got a couple shots here that I'm pretty happy with as well. Ooh, this is one of my favorite shots from the trip, actually. I think when I took it, I didn't think very much of it, but I love the way that the dock makes this sort of zigzag line composition. And even though the light was really harsh, because the air was a little bit hazy, I think it has this ethereal look that just feels a little bit warmer than it actually was. But I really like this shot. And I love the way that the woman's coat just flares out kind of perfectly there. The Cape Lookout Trail at Cape Lookout State Park had been on my list for a bunch of years now, and I had driven by the area several times, but for one reason or another, just hadn't made it happen. So I'm happy that I finally got to check it out. It's a really cool area. The Cape juts about 2 miles straight out into the Pacific Ocean, and it's something like 500 or 800 feet tall, so you get really good views. Sometimes you've got to peek through the trees like this, but I think that can actually add to the photos, adding some framing and such. Unfortunately, I didn't give myself quite enough time for this hike. It was about a 5-mile hike, so I figured it would take me about 2 hours, but I sort of forgot that I was in photographer mode, and everything takes a lot longer when I'm in photographer mode. And so I only ended up having time to do about half of the trail because I had one more location planned for sunset that evening, but I am really glad that I went, even if I couldn't do the whole thing. I'll definitely be back again to check out the view from the very end, though, because from what I understand, it's a pretty good spot to watch the gray whale migration when they go north and then south later in the year. Pacific City is one of my absolute favorite towns on the whole Oregon coast. The Cape Kiwanda area is so cool, and more than a lot of places, I could see myself exploring here for several full days in a row without really running out of things to shoot and places to explore. I've been here a bunch of times, and every time I come back, I feel like I'm seeing stuff that just I somehow have never seen before, places that I just have never stumbled upon, and the light's always different. And I've gotten a lot of my all-time favorite photos from the Oregon coast here. It's a cool place, and one that I will happily return to time and time again. This is my favorite shot from the trip. Sometimes these things change and another shot will grow on me over time, But as of now, I just love this one. It just feels very much Oregon coast in winter. Not an epic sunset, but beautiful light. And I'm not exactly sure what was going on with this boat. I think they might have been stranded on the sandbar there. They had been there the entire time I was there. And as I was leaving, some fire trucks drove out onto the beach. I'm guessing maybe they were trying to rescue them. But in any case, I think that the boat made for a pretty good part of my composition, and I hope they're okay, but I'm kind of glad that they were stuck there that day. The next day I headed up to the small town of Astoria, and on the way I decided to check out a waterfall that I had seen on Google Maps called Young's River Falls. I didn't really know what to expect, but it ended up being pretty cool. It was something like 55 feet tall and flowing pretty well. It was also really cold. I think my car thermometer said 26 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe -3 Celsius or something like that. And the rocks around the waterfall were super icy, so I didn't really do much exploring around there from a photography composition perspective. I got a couple okay detail shots though, but it was just so cold that I didn't want to spend very much time. But I would definitely love to come back on a warmer day when I can spend more than 10 minutes or so before my hands freeze. Astoria was a lovely town. I really enjoyed it. It's the kind of place that I could maybe see myself living. It's on the coast, but it's also in the mouth of the Columbia River. You get lots of cool shipping traffic going through there. Got some cool stuff in Washington just north of there. I think it's a little bit expensive because it's somewhat close to Portland, but I definitely see the appeal. Towards the end of the day, I drove up to the Astoria Column. It's this big monumental tower that you can pay $5 to park and then walk up and see the view. And the view was really cool from the top, but it was really cold and windy up at the top, and so I didn't stay up there very long. I also kind of thought that maybe some of the better photos were from down closer to the parking lot, but as I was heading back down after just a quick peek at the top, I thought, okay, let's take a minute and see, am I missing anything? Is there anything that I can do creatively here besides just taking a picture of the nice view? And as I was walking back into the column through the door, I noticed the golden light on the door there, and I thought, okay, maybe I can do something with that. And I think I got a pretty good shot. So note to self, if you're feeling like you don't have the energy for it or the conditions suck and you're not very comfortable, just take a little bit more effort and see, is there anything that I can do creative here? Maybe you'll come away with something cool. So on my final morning, the weather had clearly taken a turn for the worse. It was still very cold, but now we had clouds, wind, and some rain as well. So it felt like we were back in the Pacific Northwest. Honestly, I don't really mind this kind of weather. I get tired of it by the middle of February or March, and I'm ready for some sun again. But after having a reasonably sunny January this year, it's kind of nice to see the Pacific Northwest in its gray, cloudy, moody atmosphere. I think because of the light and the conditions, I decided to experiment with some black and white photography that morning, and I'm pretty happy with how some of these shots turned out. From Cannon Beach, I headed down to one of the most epic spots on the northern Oregon coast, a place called Elk Flats Trail in Oswald West State Park. It's not a far drive south of the Cannon Beach and Seaside area, and it's a pretty short trail, and it gets you to just one of the most incredible views in the entire region. This was a wonderful trip, and I got quite a few photos that I'm really happy with. I hope you enjoyed following along on this little behind-the-scenes video. Before we go, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of the wonderful people who are supporting me over on my new Patreon page. This is the best way to directly support these travel photography projects, and patrons also get access to exclusive videos and essays, including monthly updates, thoughts on photography and the creative process, the gear I'm using, B-side photos, and much more. I also have a free newsletter called Postcards, where once per month I share new photos from these trips. You can think of it as an alternative to social media platforms like Instagram. There are links to both of those in the description below. And with that, I'll say thanks so much for watching. Thanks for all of your support, and I'll see you again next month. Bye.